I was just thinking about the fact that if they are in this environment where they haven't had success, they haven't had a godly example, you do want to give them something of a taste of the fact that godly living brings forth blessings. Yes, they need to wake up in the morning and say, I am made by God and I want to serve the Lord. But there's an experiential piece to this where they need to experience that God's ways are good. And so I would say try to find a boss, a situation with an economic and a relational component where a young man can learn working hard brings blessings.
Yes.
Working hard brings fruitfulness in family. Leaning into relationships and not away from relationships brings joy in one's life.
And welcome, my friends, to the Generations broadcast today. Another segment of Discipleship for Dads. We're so excited to be together to talk about the things that matter most for our families today. And we're hitting almost ground zero today on the broadcast. With me again, Todd Strasser, pastor of our little church out here in our community, and Bill Roach, president of Christian Home Educators of Colorado and Generations, and Danny Craig, director for Generations, and myself, your host, Kevin Swanson. A couple of dads, 4 dads in studio to talk about how to launch our sons. And again, hugely important, guys, hugely important. What could be more important than, first of all, reviving manhood, but then preparing young men to be men, launching men into their own households to be the future fathers and husbands. And so this is, I think, where we priming the pump to the restoration of manhood, fatherhood, godly men of God, and encourage folks to sign up to our Act Like Men conference, generations.org/shepherds, right? But that's coming up end of October, sorry. That's coming up end of October 29th through November 1st. So, but today, how to launch our sons into their own lives in this day and age. And what we're talking about here is establishing trajectory. Maybe he hasn't quite launched out of the household yet, but he's moving in the direction. And I'd like to use the example of Amanza Wilder just simply because that's the way things were done for 5,900 years until we all turned dysfunctional. Well, maybe not all of us, but society has pretty much lost its way.
Yeah, I wasn't launched. I don't remember a launching party in my life.
I was removed from the house.
You kicked out. That's not exactly the goal.
It was a kindly thing. My parents went back to the mission field. My parents went back to the mission field off to college, but it's kind of on my own. Very little mentorship, very little sense of direction for myself, except for the fact I had to get my degree in mechanical engineering. But wow, we need to develop something of a biblical concept of this, and of. As I said, Amanza Wilder eventually got his fields. He built his fields, then built his house, and then brought Laura Ingalls Wilder into his home. And that's the Little House on the Prairie series, as some of you have read that series. Proverbs 24:27 is the verse that came to my mind right away, and that is, prepare your outside work first, make it fit for yourself in the field, and afterward, build your house. Right. And I believe this was the way in which young men took on the responsibilities of life. They would build their field first. And one of the reasons for betrothal, which was pretty common throughout the centuries, was they were planning to be married to this woman. But they didn't have their fields, didn't have their house in place.
Right.
And so you take somebody like Joseph, who betrothed to Mary, and he has this period of time in which he's developing his career and building a house, and then he brings his wife into it, and they're married. So that was the way they did it for years and years. And it seems to me that we need this process in place for our sons as well. Bill?
Yeah, without a doubt, this is an important thing. I was thinking back on my own life. I got shipped off at 14 years old to a boarding school. And I wasn't ready for that. Now, my mother, I think she did what she knew to be best, and God took care of me. And, he was there at that school just like he was at home. So the Lord took care of it, but I was nowhere near ready for to be sent off on my own. So I think this is pretty important. Yeah.
In general, would you brothers agree that our young men should be in our homes throughout a fair amount of the process, especially the preparatory process? Now, again, there are exceptions to the rule, but that our sons are with us, we're mentoring them, we're preparing them, they're building their fields, and then eventually they launch into their own house. I didn't like the idea of the age of unaccountability.
Right.
It's the way I used to call it, because I lived the age of unaccountability.
Yeah.
And that is a little bit of what you're talking about, because if you were 14 when you moved out, I was 17, 18 years of age, and went off to the college, and it was flop house, dorm room, nobody really holding me accountable. That's why I call it the age of unaccountability. Nobody really holding me accountable. Yeah. And then I get married. I'm back in some kind of covenantal accountability at 26 years of age. But it was not really a good period of time for me.
Right. Yeah, the age of unaccountability. But I think what happens in reality is you're always being discipled by something or somebody.
You might have the wrong disciple.
It might not be unaccountability. It might just be a different discipler. It might have been the frat house or whatever. But I think, yes, you stay in the home as much as possible, because your father, according to Scripture, should be your primary discipler. And so, yeah, you stick with your discipler until that launching occurs.
Is that what happened to you, Danny?
I was at home till 26 when I got married.
Is that right?
Yeah, okay. Moved straight from home to our first rental house.
Right. So.
And I would say there's a couple of things that were beneficial and things that need to be thought through. One, I was able to learn how to navigate relationships with my mom and dad in a different way than when I was 16, 17, 18. So I'm thankful that my mom and dad provided for that switch. If that's not allowed for, and you're not sort of allowed the freedom to kind of be able to establish yourself in terms of your own individual direction and begin setting that trajectory while you're still inside your parents' house, that could be challenging. Yeah, by God's grace, I was able to do that. And so I think that's what allowed it to be a healthy experience, because I still had that accountability and input, but was given the latitude to be setting my own direction at points.
So what you're saying is an intensely controlling environment on the part of a father, or the apron string thing with mother, is not going to function very well for a young man.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you don't want that young man looking to his mom and dad for every decision he has to make.
And I think it's a gradual process, too. I remember with Chad that, by the time he was ready to get married, it was just a slight nudge for him to leave the house, because he had already been heading that way. He was working in a ministry with you, Kevin, gone 3 or 4 days, home 3 or 4 days. That was a great transition for him and for us. So it was a gradual thing where he was getting more independence. He was building his businesses. So by the time he got married, it wasn't really that much of a move out the door.
And I think my son had 5 or 6 important mentorships in his life. And we have emphasized mentorships, and we want to get back to that in a little bit.
Right.
But the mentorship can be so effective in merging the young man into the macroeconomy, in networking. It's amazing how much networking happens in mentorship. He gets to know others in the industry, and then finds his niche in the industry. And that happened with Chad. That happened with my son. And I'm so thankful for the mentorships that God brought for my son as well. I continue to do mentorships, by the way. I'm, always 15, 20 young men I'm working with.
Thank
and
you
you as
that.
well, Todd.
Yeah. And speaking of that, we talk about preparing your field, preparing the outside work. And obviously there's like a practical economic process there. The man needs to be able to provide for a household, something like that. What do you think, to what degree is the Scripture referring to a maturing, spiritual maturity, a character development as is preparation too?
Boy, that's so essential, isn't it? You think about the reason why a 34-year-old man is not ready to be married. He just hasn't developed the character, the maturity. And I do believe that in general, women mature faster than men do. But this is a huge challenge for the day. And I think a lot of it is because our young men are not being challenged. And I wonder sometimes if the homeschool environment is even more unhealthy in so many situations because that young man is playing games in his mother's basement and he's not really getting out there. So young men need to be challenged, and they need to grow in sobriety, maturity, the fear of God, responsibility. You said the word responsibility, and I think that's very core to becoming a man of God.
We talked about mentorship, and that's very important and beneficial for the economic side of the preparation. But for me, I would say one of the most significant things was that mentorship helped me get the vision for my life, which certainly came through my dad, but also another conversation I had with a father at age 20 was really pivotal for me and helped me get that vision that drove that motivation and responsibility in terms of preparing the field and that spiritual development. He basically, at age 20, he came to me, he says, "Hey, Danny, what are your goals?" And I'm like, "I'd like to get married." He said, "When would you like to get married?" I hadn't put a number on that. He says, "Well, when would you like to be ready for marriage?" And I said, 25. And then he said, what kind of savings are you going to need to have saved up? How much do you need to set aside every year to hit that goal? And that was a real turning point for me where I realized the way I spend my time this evening, this weekend, all of this is going to have a real practical impact on my ability to get married.
And that's where it starts, is gain a vision. That young man needs a vision. And,
I remember at 12 years old, took Chad to the mountains. We went up to Estes Park. And I was sensing that he was starting to get, like, what am I supposed to do with my life? Which maybe 12 might be a little young for it. But we laid it out. I said, okay, from 13 to 18, you go figure out what your gifts are, what you want to do, what kind of work you want to do. And we'll study together. And I said, at 18, you start making X amount of dollars. And by 23, if you stay at home, you'll have that much money saved and you'll be ready to get married. Because he had said he thought 23 was a good age to get married at.
Todd, I want to get back to what you said earlier, and that is you're looking at young men gaining certain character traits that effectively signal that they're ready for life. They're ready to be married, to have a family. Right. What are those? What would you expect? I know you've a couple of daughters, just married. Just try to picture that, envision it for just a moment. What are you looking for in a young man to say he's ready for launching, ready for life?
Yeah, I think in a big picture, what are we doing and what are their desires? It's to be a husband, right, which is a pretty big role within itself. And of course, we probably all believe that as soon as you become a husband, you immediately need to be ready to become a father, because that's how God works in couples. So, I mean, those are some pretty big steps. That's a pretty big change. So we look biblically at all that's involved with those two roles, which are significant, high callings. I mean, husband and father, there's a lot to that. And so that's big picture. That's what we're launching towards. That's what he's gaining towards. But behind that, of course, that comes with the ability to lead, right? Humbly lead, the ability to handle yourself spiritually before you can encourage and lead others spiritually. There's definitely a maturity, and I mean a spiritual maturity in that. And I think what's important by that, and you kind of hinted at the homeschool, the greenhouse of the homeschool world is sometimes not the best thing for our sons. So it's a good question for fathers out there. Are you just sheltering your sons from all of the trials and tribulations, or are you letting them go through that? Because that is actually one of the key preparations for these roles.
Okay, he loses his job 3 months into his marriage. What does he do? Or, his wife is ill after having the baby for about 9 months, and he has to be up every hour on the hour. Right. Throughout the night, and then he has to go to work the next day. These sorts of scenarios. Right. Is he ready for this? Those are the sorts of pictures that are in my mind.
So again, I mean, if you take back and you go, wow, I want my son to launch and do well in those scenarios, I need to teach him not how to react, but how to respond maturely. And so instead of waiting till he's married 3 months for that to happen, how is he growing in those abilities now? Trusting God.
One thing I saw, if you take what you want your son to be, you look at the warnings that God gives to men. You got to provide, right? Otherwise, you're worse than an infidel. Don't love money. right? You need to learn how to love your wife. You need to be humble. You need to be merciful. So those are all the warnings to grown men about what to be careful about. So we're training the young men to make sure that these things are well in them.
And what I heard in what you were just saying, Todd, is you want to make sure your sons have plenty of opportunities to fail before they're married, so that their first opportunity to fail is not when their wife is having a health break. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there's that there, because that builds. We know that the Lord works through that, right? Romans 5, he works through that, not just to refine us, but also to the point where we can actually rejoice in tribulations, because we know God's building character in us, which builds hope and trust in God. So that it all works together for that spiritual maturity. But we also want, obviously, our sons to be able to lead spiritually. I mean, even if you look at the call of a husband in Ephesians 5, there's a lot there. How do you prepare to lay down your life, to wash by the water of the word? How are we instructing in all those things and readying them for that?
Right. He needs to be the spiritual leader in his home. He needs to be able to pray with the lifting up of holy hands without wrath and without doubting in all sorts of situations. Is he ready for that? Right. Does he do that in your home right now? Is he leading spiritually, leading in prayer? Is he ready to shepherd his kids? Will he bring his children up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord? Right. Is he going to be the resident theologian? 1 Corinthians 14:34. His wife has a question. She comes home, asks her husband, but he's got to be sure he's ready for that. So there's also that he is a faithful churchman. So let's talk about that just for a moment. Yes. His relationship with family life, that's important. But his relationship with the church and his engagement in church life, that's important as well. It is. That he is able to perhaps, give a word in season, an exhortation to a younger brother in the church, that he is a prayer man. He prays in the church. He is faithful in attending church services. I mean, are those important to you?
They're important because I think they represent priority in the man's life. What is important? Is he going to prioritize the bride of Christ and the church in that way, or is he prioritizing something, recreation, something else?
I want to talk about financial next. So we talked a little bit spiritual, about family life, about church life.
Kevin, just one thing on the church side of things.
Okay, right.
Thinking about it through the lens of, is he a disciple and does he disciple? Is he a disciple in the church context? Is he leaning into discipleship relationships? Is he absorbing from the preaching? Is he getting and seeking out wisdom and discipleship versus being the maverick?
Right.
And then does he have a lifestyle of positively influencing and discipling others in the body?
Yes, both ways. But we'll move on to the financial stuff in just a moment, because that's pretty critical. That's the building the field. And that's building the home and bringing his wife into it. So that next, friends, we're going to continue on this question of how to successfully launch our sons into their own lives, to their own homes, in just a moment on Generation. Stay with us.
What happened to the church? We've traded courage for comfort, conviction for compromise, and what once stood strong now feels like jelly. A gelatinous, feel-good faith that demands nothing and offers even less. That's why Kevin Swanson wrote Strong. It's not a soft book. It's not a safe book. To anyone tired of the lukewarm, the flabby, the fake, this is a call to real strength. Strong grace, strong gospel, strong Savior, for those ready to stand firm and strengthen what remains. Grab your copy now at strongthebook.com. That's strongthebook.com. Not for the faint of heart, but for those who know it's time to be strong.
And we are back on this segment of Discipleship for Dads. How do we launch our sons? And we've talked a little bit about the spiritual, the family, the church. But let's focus in on the financial for just a moment. We want to be sure that young man is at the point where he can get married, he can build a house. And I really, a big part of what I'm about is let's see if he can get debt-free on this house by the time he's 26 or 36 or, at some point. He's got a financial vision. In his mind, he's saving his money. He's moving his gross income from $24,000 a year to $62,000 a year over a period of time. He's got to build his fields, whether that be in the trades, whether it be in a professional career, whether it be an entrepreneurial or corporate, either way, he's got to build his fields. How does he do this, Danny? You did it. Somehow.
I didn't know you were
by
going
the
to be
grace
next.
of God.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
examples.
So the thing that came to my mind as I was thinking about this was the benefit of starting super, super early on these things.
I know.
And
helps.
I'm thankful for a mom who had me washing dishes by myself at 5.
At 5 years of age.
At 5 years of age.
So start at 5.
And I know this is going to sound really cliche, but like it makes a big difference, right? I was just talking to Josiah. You know, Josiah's 18, and he's
Todd's son, by the way.
Todd's son. He's managing a crew of 3 plumbers right now. But I know that started back at 8. You know, I talked to another young man recently. He's got a lawn mowing business. He's like, yeah, last year I saved up enough money to buy one of my customers' homes and turn it into a rental.
Wow.
And I said, well, when did you start your lawn mowing business? And he says, at age 9, when my grandpa gave me his old leftover lawnmower, I started mowing my first lawn.
There you go.
And I talked to another kid recently. He started mowing lawns at 8. The point is, like, it's little steps. And I think the economy is shifting. And I think this maybe is the mindset shift, where the typical thought is I walk through these educational hoops, and the economy hands me a job.
Right.
And now it's
not working
you
that
got to
way.
go out there and you got to grab the job.
And you got to prove yourself.
You got to find
the
the
market.
job. And so what that starts with is all the little opportunities at 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 to go find the job. And I don't know that it's a lot more complicated than being faithful in little things, and God will make you.
Well, I think you've
faithful
said
in
before,
much.
just get out there and just do something.
Yeah.
Do anything.
Yeah.
Just start engaging the economy in any way, shape, or form. And that's why the family economy is so helpful.
Yeah.
But also just getting your kids started early. You did that, Bill.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to make sure they're not being lazy. That's work from day one. I mean, even little 2 and 3-year-olds are helping mom with different things, but you're constantly looking for a way to elevate the work level. I remember we had this garage sale. It was back in Wee Ridge, so I'm going to guess that Chad is 7, 8 years old. And he made a cafe. He and his sisters made the cafe to go along with the garage sale. So he was going to sell things.
Well, like coffees and cookies.
Yeah, hot dogs, everything. So he held the sign out on the road to get people to come in. And he held the sign about the garage sale, figuring that if we get more people to the garage sale, he's going to sell more. Well, what he figured out was that he was at the end of our road, but there weren't a lot of cars. He wanted to go down to the main road and hold the sign where there were more cars so they'd see it. And his mother was like, ooh, he's too little to be down there. And I'm like, he's learning a lot about marketing. I'm going to send him down there and tell him to stay on the sidewalk and not get killed. But I remember thinking he's getting it now.
That's good.
Well, and his marketing is, to this day, some of the best things that have happened to generations for sure.
Yeah. Amen.
He
Amen.
is an amazing marketer, and
Right.
it started when he was out on the main road holding the sign.
One of the times it started there, yeah.
So goals. What are the goals? By the time he's 16, 18 years of age, what would be good goals in general? I realize, you've got a flexibility. It takes some boys a little bit longer to
right.
grow up. Now, not everybody's an entrepreneur. I think we got to remember that.
Sure.
Some of us are 30% entrepreneurs, some 60%, some like Chad was a 99.4% entrepreneur. But we've got to get them working. And we got to get that income up. Do you agree with that, Todd?
Yeah, and back to the scripture you referenced, it seems like there's 2 components to preparing your fields. It's obviously some kind of sustainable provision, but then it's also establishing a place for a household. So I think a lot of us think in terms of, well, he's got to be able to get a house or get somewhere to live is obviously helpful, but also, provision for something bigger than yourself. And that's a big shift from the worldview today, right? Which is like, well, husband will work, wife will work. There's kind of these dual income streams. Well, that doesn't comport with everything of family life that we want. So, what we're talking about that's different from the age today is, yes, the young man's going to provide for his household off of whatever endeavors he does.
Another metric that I've used that I think has been helpful, and I'm encouraging this with my grandkids, is that you start a 4-year-old with a goal to be able to work steady for 10 minutes.
That's good.
You know,
Yeah,
we had
that's
some of
good.
our young grandkids hauling big rocks, actually, to a part in the front of our home where we wanted to make it a little nicer. So there was actually a stack of these large rocks that was just dumped in the backyard. And so they would do this for 10, 15 minutes at a time, and they were somewhat successful at it. And Grandpa gave them $5 for the job, and ran off to Walmart and got themselves a car. A toy car. But, this is just the beginning. So,
Yeah.
I mean, my goal is maybe by the time they're 6 years old, they can do 1 hour. By the time they're 8 years old, they're at 3 hours a day. And by the time they're 16 years of age, don't you think that the average young man should be able to do a 50-hour week, roughly? And by the time he's 18, he should be able to pull off a 60-hour week. I know that's tough. That means 10 hours, 6 days in a row, taking the Sabbath off. But there's something about young men doing hard things. We make things too easy for them.
If
days.
Dad's not doing it, he won't do it.
Well, that's true. So Dad's got to be the example here. But don't you think young men, wow, they've got to be busy.
Yeah.
Danny, am I pushing this too hard?
I mean, obviously, every child is different,
Yes, that's true.
But I would say that there's a couple of things that are really beneficial from learning those long hours. One is it keeps you humble, and it keeps you busy.
It keeps you out of trouble.
And keeps you out of trouble. So I would just ask, what else are you going to be doing with your time?
That's for sure. That's for sure.
Do you have something better?
Well, yeah. Well, they'll find something different
Right.
to do that's not edifying.
And granted,
to
they
do.
might have some studies to do, but I'm talking about summer months.
Right.
Or I'm talking about, maybe they're only studying 3-4 hours a day. What are they doing the other
That's it.
12
that's
hours
key.
a day?
That's key. And I think some will find, particularly those that do choose a college track, if there's a worthwhile reason to go to college. But if there is, then some will find a balance of academic study can be hard, can take 6 hours a day if you're pre-college, but don't just leave it there. Supplement also with work or with something else. And we have one of our sons going through that right now. He's probably more on an engineering kind of college track, but that doesn't mean he's just does school. He needs the work too. So it is more of a full day, like you're describing.
I'll give you a real life example here. We're taking care of my grandchildren, Chad's kids, this week while he's gone, but. Went outside on Labor Day morning with my 10-year-old grandson, and there was a patch in the backyard where weeds had just taken over, and I didn't realize it. And I said, "Caden, we're gonna probably weed right here, this whole patch there." And he looked at it, and he looked at me. He said, "Papa, don't you think weed killer would work better?" and I said, "You know what? We're gonna get weed killer on now, but right now I want us to get these weeds done." And I knew this. He was looking at it like this is going to be hard. So I laid it out for him. I said, "We're going to just do right here. I think it'll take us maybe about an hour. It's going to be difficult, but at the end of it, it's going to look really good. Granny will be really happy. And when we're done, we'll go in and play the farming game for 2 hours with, you and your brother." So I had to lay it out a little bit because I was sensing that it wasn't going to be a difficult job, but to give him the idea that there is a reward with the labor but also to set it out the hour.
Yeah.
Right? That was important.
Yeah.
Back to your question, 50, 60, I think what you're hoping for by 16, 17, 18 is that they're so well acquainted with the benefits of working.
That's it.
Yes.
That
It's a natural.
It's a natural. So
Yeah.
I had the situation with Jed, my 6-year-old, and we've had some character issues, and so some privileges got taken away, and I said, this is going to be like this for a few weeks until you can build a pattern of trustworthiness. And we're doing dishes last night, and he's going the extra mile. He's clearing stuff off the counter, stuff I didn't even ask him to do. I'm like, that's interesting. So I came up to Jed afterwards. I said, "That was great, but why did you do that?" He says, "Because I want to show you that I really want to be trustworthy, and I want to." These were his words. "I want to be able to be independent and do things by myself." And obviously I want him to stay in relationship, but the point was at 6, he was connecting the dots between responsibility and the benefits of it.
And that may be the definition of launching, because we're trying to get to this launching thing. What is this launching?
Yeah.
Right.
It's the self-motivation. It's
Yes.
the embracing of responsibility. It's the stepping out on one's own.
Yeah.
He's got to be able to do that. He can't just be booted out, similar to what you said.
Right.
Is you just nudged him a little bit as he was getting married, but that's because
He was already heading to the door.
He'd been heading to the door for the previous 4 or 5 years.
Yes.
But you can almost think forward into the capacities of being launched. What is he going to have to be able to do? He's going to have to be able to do the dishes up by himself. He's going to have to be able to provide and work for 50 hours a week without being nudged constantly. So how do you get him there so he's used to it?
Yeah.
I want to speak to the family that is particularly challenged with a young man, because believe me, there are some extremely challenging situations, and we've all confronted these, whether it be in our own families or perhaps a more distant relative or friends or neighbors or church members struggling to this launch for a couple of reasons. One is bad habits, laziness, porn habits, etc. You do need to get through these things. You've got to be able to plow through these things by the grace of God, by prayer, by the gospel, by Jesus coming in and saving us from our sins. Let's make sure we bring that into the discussion. But what do you say to the single mom who's really struggling with her 17-year-old son, and she's just not making any progress? A lot of things: mentorship, college, hanging out with his friends in some apartment downtown, military. Military is good for discipline. There are certain choices that are better than others, even in situations where that mom or that dad is struggling with that young man. And one of the things I'm just going to say is, I don't think just tossing him into a dorm room with 3 or 4 other guys is really the best solution. Or he has no idea what he's doing in his life. Let's just throw him into college. That seems to me not to be the best solution. But what would you say? Let's get some positive direction here. Military? You were military.
I was.
What do you think?
I mean, I will say this, although there's been some changes in the military that I'm not a big fan of. I will say it changed people's lives. I mean, that we're reckless, that we're proud. It humbles them. It adds structure to their life. Yeah, exactly. And I've even seen young men, in the homeschool who were homeschooled. I'm a big entrepreneurial guy. I'm very pro-entrepreneurial, but go get a job and work for a boss and be yelled at is sometimes a really good thing. Sometimes really helpful. So I think what we have to identify though is, when a son's resistant to launching, there's something going on in the heart, right? So we're first going to pray and seek what's going on there, and for God to work there, and for obviously motivation to rise out and to gain vision that way.
Bill, any wisdom when you've got a young man that's just not quite on board with the program?
I was probably that young man.
Okay, so you can speak to this.
My dad left when I was 13, and my mom just recently became a Christian. I became a Christian, and I mentioned she sent me off to a boarding school, but I'm looking back now, she sent me to this Christian Service Brigade thing. Okay. It was kind of like the Christian version of Boy Scouts, and I remember a guy there taught me about the things of life that probably my dad should have taught me and didn't. So there were things now I look back on, she was purposeful to get me out in front of men, because I was strong-willed, I'm sure. But I went to the Christian version of military college, which was Bob Jones University. and so I did. There was a rising time at 7, and you had to be in bed. And they've relaxed the rules a bit, but it was discipline that I needed. So I was certainly the lazy, undisciplined guy. I had a heart to learn, but it would get entangled with the things of the world when I didn't have a guy, a good mentor around. I got lazy and different things, or I got too involved maybe in sports, things like that. But I say that if you ask my mother, this is important. If you said, well, how did you survive with Bill? She said, I just prayed and asked God to help me.
That's right.
And she did the next thing in front of her.
And the blessing of mentors, the blessing of disciplers. I think of the movie The Forge that just came out. And I draw that into it. And we've been banging the drum on mentorship for a very long time. You can get that in the work world. as in the case of the Forge. You can get it in the church, but Danny, speak to it. I know this is your heart.
I was just thinking about the fact that if they are in this environment where they haven't had success, they haven't had a godly example, you do want to give them something of a taste of the fact that godly living brings forth blessings. Yes, they need to wake up in the morning and say, I'm made by God and I want to serve the Lord. But there's an experiential piece to this where they need to experience that God's ways are good. And so I would say try to find a boss, a situation with an economic and a relational component where a young man can learn working hard brings blessings.
Yes.
Working hard brings fruitfulness in family. Leaning into relationships and not away from relationships brings joy in one's life. So try to find some kind of environment where they can sense, I see a picture of blessedness, I want that. And then also, hopefully you can at the same time give them an environment where they learn the consequences of not following the Lord. And if that's a boss, a mentorship, I'm a huge fan of young men working a job for 3 years straight and
3
getting
years.
the laziness, the immaturities beat out of them. And hopefully that can be with a godly boss. But sometimes you have to do a hybrid. Maybe it's a boss who's just an unbeliever, but he's a drill sergeant. And then on the other side of his life, there's a family where he can spend some time in the evening and learn some of the virtues of family life. Piece it together, try to create that environment.
Wow.
Amen.
Wow. We're talking about the very heart of our ministry here. And this is really getting really to the heart of it. It's the hearts of the fathers turning to the sons, sons to the fathers, that mentorship and discipleship, the vision that Jesus established for the 3 years he was with us. And so that's a big part of our ministry, my friends. I'd encourage you to our introduction to mentorship. In fact, I contrast this with a 4-year college degree. Which would you do? The Kickstart program or a 4-year college degree? Kickstart program is about half of it. It introduces the young person to mentorship and how to do it and how to maximize a mentorship. Some of the things that Danny's just been talking about. It's called Kickstart. We've got a video series.
But it's not half the cost. It's like
it's
one 1,000th.
It's like 1/1000th of the cost of a college education. It's a pretty good deal. Okay, and then also How the World Runs. I wrote this for 14-year-olds. Your son actually told me he liked it.
Oh yeah, that's a good book.
So it kind of introduces a 14-year-old to the macroeconomy, but really the micro stuff. So I encourage you to. It's how to get your first job, how to be a good Joseph in the workplace, how to get along with difficult people in the workplace, how to pay off your first house, et cetera, et cetera. So How the World Runs and your part in it. It also has a study guide that goes with it. Also providing them for their first mentorship, introducing them to a first mentorship, kind of a small mentorship at 14 or 15 years of age. And then this is our second part of our mentorship program called Kickstart, all available at generations.org. All to help you launch your sons into life. And hopefully these resources will be helpful. And hopefully this discussion has been helpful to our listening audience. So thank you, folks.
I've learned some good stuff. Thank you,
joining
brothers.
us. And also encourage dads and sons to our Act Like Men conference. It's generations.org/shepherds. And so sign up right there. Great time we're going to have together here at the end of October, right here in Elizabeth, Colorado, near to our Generations Ministry. So, friends, invite you to that program coming up in just a couple of months. It's called Act Like Men, the Shepherds Conference, right here in Elizabeth, Colorado. This is Kevin Swanson with Todd, Bill, and Danny, and we want to invite you back again next time as we continue to lay down a vision for the next generation.
This has been a production of the Generations Media Network. For more information, go to generations.org/media.